Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Your weekly dose of news and advice that comes to your pocket every single Saturday. Holding it down, here we got Mack, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Enjoy today's show. Hey, welcome back into the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. We made it. You're here. Week 14, the first week of the fantasy playoffs is upon us. It's episode 82. We're talking everything you need to know to be ready for week 1 of playoffs to get that much important W. And if you didn't make it to the playoffs, I'm sorry. My sincerest apologies. But listen, your season is not over. We're going to be talking some daily fantasy sports today, primarily DraftKings. If you want to stay involved with fantasy, daily, weekly, this is what you need to know. We'll do that segment at the end. Got the whole crew with us, wherever you guys are, however you may be listening or watching to the show. We appreciate you. Got Mark, Scott, Landon here to help you win in the biggest week of the year. Boys, how you been?
Yo, guys, I have been really good. This is the most important week of the year for most of our listeners. And if you have a bye this week, first of all, congrats. But we're going to talk about how to prepare for 2 weeks ahead of time as well. So, yeah, I'm with you. Just like you guys, we're grinding. A couple teams, I missed the playoffs. A couple teams, I'm in the playoffs. So we're sweating these start sits just like you. We've got some really good questions coming up today. And if you have more, send us a DM on Instagram, Twitter. We're still going to be live on Sunday, an hour before the kickoff, and we can answer every start sit. Last week was fire. Mackenzie, you and Mark did it. Yeah, you guys did a great job last week. We had tons of start sits. Hopefully, this week's just as fire. But without further ado, Scotty, how you doing, my man?
Gents, we have made it. It is the playoffs. This is not a drill. This is why you've been tuning in all season long, and I am so excited to help everybody hopefully avoid the disastrous decision that I made last year at this time when I decided that Doug Martin was potentially a great start over this upshot guy named Derrick Henry. So make sure you tune in to all the starts and sits, because if you don't do enough research, you might make a decision like that. Never gonna let that happen again. Mark, how are you doing?
Yes, I'm great too. You better believe I'm great. It's the playoffs. I've got a couple teams in contention myself, and I want to thank a lot of people, like my beautiful girlfriend for supporting me, whether I was coming off a loss or a victory. She was always there for me. My parents, lots of people to thank for where my teams are at right now, and we all know how important this road has been for us all season, but it's finally here. I'm back in the booth with you boys, and that's always a highlight of my life. So I'm sure we got lots of listeners that are just tooth and nail waiting to see what we got to say this week.
Yes, sir. We're going to kick things off first with a listener league update. Now, we've been battling all season long with 8 very important listeners, and it's come down to the nitty-gritty here. Unfortunately, only one of the 4 of us made it into the playoffs. It was tight. Week 13, I was going up against Scott. I got handed my food on a silver platter from Scotty. He laid a beat down on me, and it looked like Mark was going to come through with the victory. Ended up falling short due to Adam Thielen not playing, basically. And so I'm going to be representing the 4 of us in the playoffs, and I wish it was more. I wish there was 2 or 3 or even 4 of us in the dance, but I guess I'm going in solo here, fellas.
Yeah, and you know what? I sent a message to the group today, and I am super proud of our listener league. These guys battled all year round. They're probably one of the most active leagues I am a part of. This is one of my favorite leagues to be in. And you know what? Regardless of who wins, I'm going to be extremely happy for them. It means a lot. The winner of this league automatically gets in next year and gets to enjoy another fun-filled season with us. If you're interested in trying to get in our league, it's hyper competitive, as the guys in our league knows. And yeah, send us DMs. We're gonna post it this summer and how to get in. But either way, I'm pulling for all these guys. I'm really not pulling for you, Mackenzie. I hope you get out first round. Sorry about it.
Thanks a lot, Landon.
Yeah, and you know what?
so
Speaking
much.
of like involvement from the players in that league, like we've got the guys that are constantly messaging. We got people who are tuning in, subscribing, commenting on our starts and sit feeds on Sundays. Like easy. I don't even know like who's more important, us or your own family. Like we owe you a case of beer or something, man. You're a G.
You got to come enjoy it with us, though.
I hope it's your family.
And also, gentlemen,
Yeah,
I will remind you that our fun is not over, because although we have the teams competing for the Listener League Championship of Glory, there is also the prestigious Toilet Bowl that will also be happening at the other half of the standings to determine who is the worst participant in the Listener League. And that bracket is active as well. Landon, you and I face off this week, so
We do.
you're going down. That toilet is yours.
Bring
Same
it.
goes for you, Adam, wherever you are. Toast.
Listen, I'm gonna flame Taylor a little bit here. He's in the toilet bowl running. Him and Mad Dog are heavy favorites for that.
Yeah, I think so.
So listen, going down the standings here, we gotta give a shout out to the guys who earned themselves first round buys. Scuba Steve in at 11-2, and Turk 822 in at 10-3. These guys, when we did the preseason vote who had the strongest teams, these guys' lineups jumped out on paper, did not disappoint the whole season. They've been active on the waivers. They've been making some nice trades. These two guys have literally wire to wire been strong competitors and never really wavered. So congrats to you guys for locking that up. Buck Waldrop comes in at third. He scored the most points in the league, 2 over Turk. He comes in at 9-4, and I am playing him first week in the quarterfinals, 3v6. And then we've got 4th and 5th seeds. We got Easy, our boy, the OG, coming in 1645 points at 8-5 record, taking on Foles Gold, who I haven't looked at the schedule, but he came back. I think he won like 4 or 5 weeks in a row, came back from the dead to get himself into the playoffs. So we've got a 4v5 matchup between them. The chatter has been crazy on these matches. These guys have already been at each other's throats, and Buck and I will settle our business. I am actually favored to win this matchup right now, but projections mean squat. So it should be an interesting first round of the playoffs. Outside of Landon wanting me to lose, Scott and Mark, what are you feeling about these matchups?
Well, oh, Captain, my captain is how I will describe this matchup. Mack, you are our champion of the season. You are representing the pod, and I hope you nothing but the best, taking down our wonderful listeners.
I am so sour by what happened last week that I'm not even going to look anymore what happens after this point. I'm just going to look at projections and base victories on that. Just going to do yard work on Sundays now, not pay attention anymore.
I've got Go ahead.
I've got faith in you, Mac. We believe in you fully. And if I was saying that I back some other guy, then hey, we'd have them on the podcast, right?
That is true.
Quick question for the three of you. Surprise question. Give me your prediction on give me one player that's going to be the most owned player on fantasy championship teams.
I mean, it's
McCaffrey?
McCaffrey or Lamar have to be the easy answers here. I think we should omit them from this question and try our best to come up with another answer.
Go ahead, guys. I have one guy I have in mind. It's a secret, just hope and dream. I'll just say it. Alexander Madison is going to be on the most championship rosters.
Ooh.
Wow.
Can't happen because Dalvin Cook's going to be just fine.
Yeah, they were saying this week he thinks there's a chance he plays this week, so I don't know if I agree with you.
It could. I mean, Dalvin Cook
so-
could easily be on the most rosters. Anyone who drafted him are in the playoffs for sure.
I was going to say Marquise boy, Derrick Henry there, just because of the way he always ramps up at the end of the season. He could be a sneaky contributor to a lot of championship teams if he does what he did last season.
I'm going to say not individual, but Patriots DST.
Oh,
man.
that's
Do better than they did last week.
I would go Pittsburgh defense. They've got a great schedule to finish up.
Crazy how much they've come back.
Mackenzie,
one thing I'll
right
say,
up there. They're so good.
Do you have a prediction?
the one thing I'll say real quick about Dalvin Cook is he has basically an SC joint sprain, which is on his clavicle.
Right.
And this was sustained in week 11 against the Broncos, and he could have played through it the other night, is what he basically said, but decided to sit it out. He will be good to go against Detroit. So count on Dalvin Cook to be in the lineup. It's not anything that he can't play through. It's just painful. And with a team that is pretty much a lock for at least a wild card in the NFC, there's no reason for Dalvin to be out there, potentially
I think a guy
putting
like
his season in jeopardy.
Leonard Fournette or DJ Chark could be on a lot of championship rosters.
I could see DJ Chark. I was actually going to go with a guy like DJ Moore.
Yeah, he's been super solid.
A guy that was drafted in, the 7th, 8th round who has really, really returned a lot of value. He's a top 10 wide receiver on the year, much like why Lamar Jackson is the biggest fantasy MVP because of where he was drafted. Sometimes it was 10th round. So Christian McCaffrey's an easy answer, but he was a top 3 pick. You expected that from him. I mean, not at this level, but you expected top 3 performance. Lamar, a lot of people weren't in on that narrative, and he's returned tremendous value. I think the same kind of exists with DJ Moore and DJ Chark, for that matter.
Yeah. I keep seeing on Twitter that people taking screenshots of their teams, shouting out fantasy analysts saying, "So happy I listened to you guys." And they have like Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook on your team. It's like, wow, like, good for you. You lucked out with that pick and you're in the playoffs. Like, it's really lucky to be in that top 3 spot anyways. So I don't know. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just salty.
I think you're just a little bit salty.
A little bit salty there.
Anyways.
As a quick reference here, my team name has now changed in the Listener League to the Four Musketeers. Regardless, Lynn, if you want me to win or not, it's now an us thing. So we are the Four Musketeers. We're going to win this ship.
I called D'Artagnan.
The hard way.
Oh, shoot. God, he's fast.
It's the only one anyone remembers anyway.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, we're going to move on here. We're going to maybe try to address some of these tough decisions that you might face in week 1. And Landon has picked out some interesting games or scenarios, let's just say. So the first one is going to be the Jets wide receivers against the Miami defense and potentially Ryan Fitzmagic. So let's talk some Jets receivers. Let's talk the Miami side of the ball. Let's talk about this game because Miami, we all thought they were going to roll over and die last week, and they come out and they beat Philly and basically end their season. Rip to Philly, who a lot of people thought were a Super Bowl contender preseason. So this should be interesting. What do you guys think?
The biggest decision I think it has to be Jameson Crowder. He's been so solid, getting a ton of targets. Despite their passing woes, he's been the one kind of steady. And he really laid an egg these past couple of weeks against Oakland and Cincinnati, both really good matchups. So people are going to be wondering whether to start Jameson Crowder or whether to roll with Robbie Anderson, who has been the opposite as of late and really putting on a big show, scoring touchdowns, getting a ton of yards. So those are the two I'm really having questions about. Scotty, you're a Jameson Crowder owner. Can you give me your 2 cents on him?
Yeah, it's been a frustrating few weeks for us Crowder owners. He's been the black hole in my roster. That's been kind of lost me a couple weeks. That being said, he has been very constant as long as his quarterback, keeps the mono at bay. And I do think going up against, the Miami Dolphins, you couldn't ask for a much better schedule for your first week of the playoffs. So if I've kind of made it into the playoffs partially because of Crowder getting those 12 receptions a game, 9 receptions a game, that volume, I think I would have to bank on it this week. It's really one of those things where if he does start to get the volume again and you've sat him, you're going to say, I sat Crowder against the Dolphins. Like, what was I thinking? Everybody wants to face Miami's defense. So I'm going to say you start him. If he's part of the reason he got you here, it's the playoffs. You want to start your studs.
Yeah, it was an uncharacteristically low pass percentage game for Sam Darnold last week. And for him to only put up 10 fantasy points, I would not make that the benchmark for him. I still think he's got a really high floor if he does complete that money zone for him, like the 66%, 70% range of his passes. He just wasn't giving those guys quite the same looks last week as he had been. So I bet you he's been putting in a ton more work to try and make those more precision passes with Crowder and Anderson, because we know that 2 weeks ago he was looking solid against Oakland. So let's see a little more of that Darnold this week. And I think both of those guys can be relevant in the same game.
Before I'm going to pass it to Mackenzie talking about Robbie Anderson shortly, but Scotty, Crowder wasn't that good. I mean, he hasn't had more than 10 targets since week 1, but his receptions have been like 5, 8, 3, 6. He hasn't gotten that many receptions, even though it probably feels like that.
Sorry, I also have Robert Woods on the same team. I get confused at times.
Okay. So, Mackenzie, Robbie Anderson, has been very good these past 2 weeks while Crowder's been poor. How do you feel about starting Robbie Anderson against a seemingly juicy matchup against Miami?
Oh, it's going to be interesting. I have owned Robbie Anderson in a couple leagues. I was very excited for him and this revamped Jets offense, and it never really panned out. And I've just been frustrated with Robbie Anderson with lack of volume, with relying on the touchdown or the big play with him. That's not really who I perceived him to be going into the season. So for me, I don't really want to go down that road if I don't have to. So in the one league I own him in, I also own DK Metcalf. I've been playing DK Metcalf instead of Robbie Anderson for a majority of the season and been quite pleased. And at this point, like for me on that team specifically, it's going to be really hard to shy away from DK even in a poorer matchup. I'm just not sure that I feel comfortable with playing Robbie at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. That's going to be a really popular question this week, I think, on our Start Sit segment. But so if anyone has Devontae Parker, they're going to start him this week. No questions asked. How comfortable do you feel streaming Ryan Fitzmagic?
Whew. So here's the thing with Fitzmagic. He sort of adopts the same mentality that Jameis does. It's like, I'm going to throw it downfield. I'm not afraid to take a shot. I'm not afraid to, get the interception. I'm just going to stay aggressive. And yeah, that hasn't worked out for Jameis Winston. He's thrown, I think, 19 or 20 picks on the year. He's basically at a 1-to-1 ratio. However, Tampa Bay has 2 of the top 3 yardage receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They are a fantasy secret, 3rd in total team points, and they have 2 top 3 receivers. So in terms of Fitzmagic, it's like the same thing. And with how he's connecting right now with Devontae Parker, I mean, why not consider streaming Ryan Fitzmagic? Week 14 is a little bit different, but the matchup isn't terrible, really.
So I'm going to give the 3 of you some rapid-fire questions about Fitzmagic. Is that okay, or do you have something else to say, Marky?
No, go for it. Yeah,
Give her, Lando.
Okay, so 3 of you can give me your separate answers. So Fitzmagic or Jameis Winston? Jameis plays Indy.
Jameis.
I think I'd have to say Jameis.
Okay. Drew Brees versus San Francisco or Fitzmagic?
I still want to go Drew.
Still going with the stud. Oh, going Fitz.
Brees.
I'd do it.
What about Jared Goff versus Seattle or Fitz?
Jared Goff.
Goff.
Oh, you're going Goff. Josh Allen versus Baltimore or Fitz?
Allen.
Maybe Fitz.
Man, that is tough. I I tend to lean Allen because of his baseline with what he gives you with his legs. It'll be a very defensive game. I'm going to go Allen.
Kyler Murray versus Pittsburgh or Fitz?
You could draw the line there. You could probably go Fitz if you want.
What about Sam? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say Murray for the same the same reason that Mack justified Allen.
For Allen, yeah.
Sam Darnold, same matchup?
I would go Fitz.
There you go. Right on.
And the only reason I say that is
a clean sweep.
I didn't get to talk about it when I was talking about Robbie, but Sam Darnold is also a factor in the whole Robbie piece because he has a knee injury that is lingering and could keep him off the field potentially this week. And we'll monitor that situation. It's only Wednesday that we're recording this. But, yeah, Sam Darnold is slightly in jeopardy of missing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
So the game I kind of mentioned, the Saints and 49ers game, both really good defenses. The 49ers coming off a heartbreaking loss against Baltimore. Raheem must start. What do we have?
Well done.
Do we have any information on Tevin Coleman? Is he hurt? Why wasn't he on the field? Do we know anything more about Tevin Coleman yet?
I have not heard anything regarding Tevin Coleman or a health-related reason as to why he wasn't utilized. Scott made it very clear about the Ronald Jones situation where he missed a blitz pickup and was essentially benched in the first quarter. And I didn't know that until Scotty and I did the waiver show. So I don't know if something like that exists for Coleman, but he just wasn't featured. 5 carries, and that was it. So with Burita coming back and Mostert kind of stepping forward, I'm not really sure I really love Coleman, but I also don't know if I love Mostert because you would have to think that Burita would be the de facto number 1.
For me, it's a hands-off on this backfield if I can help it. Scott, Mark, what do you think about this 49ers backfield?
Oh, I discussed it with Mack at length. I'm completely hands-off on this backfield unless I am in dire straits because it really feels like you're rolling the dice.
Agreed. I benched Coleman last week, and I'm super glad that I did. I'd have lost if I played him, so I think that's one of those things where you never know if it's going to be one of the 3 guys. And Breida, as electric as he can be, took a backseat to Raheem Mostert, who's, just like, he's the last one that anyone would have thought to start last week. So, yeah, too tough to say.
All right, Scotty, another really tough start-sit question is going to be about Rashad Penny. He's really come on these past couple weeks with the Chris Carson fumbling issues. We even saw in the game against Minnesota that Chris Carson actually waved Penny back on to get the goal line touch. So what do you think about Rashad Penny versus the Rams? Do you feel comfortable starting him? And going into the playoffs, how do you feel about Rashad?
I am incredibly high on Rashad Penny. Anyone who has been listening to us this entire season, they know that I was picking Penny as a penny stock to own about the time that we started this draft. Talking specifically about this week against the Rams. It's not my favorite matchup in the world, but I think there's some real-world implications into why I think Penny's a good start. First of all, both teams need this win, but I feel like Seattle needs it more. And I feel like for some reason, when Seattle's on the road, they are almost unbeatable this season. I watched that entire game, and as a Vikings fan, it was upsetting to watch. But the reality is, Rashad Penny is emerging as the player everyone thought he was when they invested that draft capital in him last year. It's been a slow grind, and he was labeled a bust very early. But for people who have kept him, I think they are going to be rewarded. I would trot him out in a flex spot happily this week against the Rams. I think they're going to keep this good time going with him. And he looked electric, falling forward, bringing 3 guys with him for gains of 5 yards when he wasn't breaking it out. I don't think that's going back in the bottle. I think him and Carson will see a 1-2 punch mentality, maybe even as much as a 50-50 time split because he's the home run hitter now. Carson's going to be smacking maybe the goal line guy, and he'll still be the lead back, But Rashad Penny, I think with one carry can change your whole week because he has found his electricity. I would roll out Rashad Penny in week 1 of the fantasy playoffs.
So Scotty, if let's just say you owned both of them, you owned Carson and you handcuffed with Penny, would you be rolling out Penny over Carson, or would you still roll Carson ahead?
It's a very tough call. I have to say, I think I would start Carson still above Penny. He's the one who brought me to the dance, he's the one I dance with, at least at this point. Carson still is the lead back in my mind, but I think they're more of a 1-2 punch mentality where there may be enough points to go around in that backfield. But I am very high on Rashad Penny, just not high enough to actually start him over Carson.
That's fair, for sure. Cool, Scotty. Awesome. I like it. I like your confidence in Penny. He might be a league winner too. You never know how these playoffs really pan out. So, Marky, you have Singletary in our Dynasty League, and you also have Geis. If you had to pick starting those two players, Singletary plays Baltimore and Geis plays Green Bay. Which are you going to start between those two running backs?
Yeah, so first of all, super impressed with both of those guys, and the fact that Geis has finally been able to get out of the injury slump, slow game slump. We know that Washington is a running team, and it was only going to be a matter of time for that guy. And for him and AP both to have succeeded last week, putting up big numbers in fantasy, getting the W over Carolina was huge. And going forward, I think between him and Singletary this week, I'd go Geis.
Oh, wow.
I was impressed with Singletary last week, but I'm stricken with how tough it is to collect yards on the ground against Baltimore. Buffalo is a tough team, and the weather is a little less forgiving where they're playing. But his touchdown last week through the air was a real tricky play that I feel like Dallas was maybe a bit susceptible to. I feel like Baltimore's defense is not susceptible to that kind of stuff, and I feel like they've got the drop on Singletary this week. Geis over Green Bay for me.
I wonder if it's just opposing defenses get lulled into a false sense of security with Gore and Peterson out there, and then get slammed with Singletary and Geis just being young and strong and agile.
It is interesting. Those are the two cases in the league that can be made with that argument. But happy to have both these young guys, and I'm going to keep them forever, so don't even try.
There you go. There's a lot of really tough... Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
The one thing one thing I saw on the doc here I wanted to touch on was the Giants are looking to have Eli Manning back at the helm. And how does this change some of the options that we have here in New York?
I think it's positive. I don't know why I feel positive about Eli coming back, but maybe because Saquon was the number one or one of the top running backs last year, and he has not done that this year. So maybe this brings Saquon back to life. The check down game is strong with Eli. So hopefully Saquon could be a top tier running back this year, or this week, I mean. It's tough. What do you think? What's your vibe with Eli coming back?
I am very curious to see how Darius Slayton is a part of the Eli Manning equation, because in weeks 1 and 2, Darius Slayton did not see a target from Eli Manning. Darius Slayton and his emergence has been a product of Daniel Jones being at the helm. Yeah. And over the last 10 weeks, he saw 61 targets. That's basically 6 a game. And I don't know what that volume is going to look like moving forward. Now, I don't know too many people who are playing Darius Slayton. I have rostered him in a couple leagues as a potential keeper for next year, being a rookie sensation. But, yeah, man, I don't know. Like, Darius Slayton's been great, but what's he going to look like with Eli? That's kind of the biggest question for me.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable starting Slayton out there, even though Philly's defense is quite susceptible. I would feel much more comfortable starting Sterling Shepard. We know there is chemistry between Eli and Sterling, I think. And I don't know about Evan Ingram. He's probably still out. He's currently questionable to play this week, but I think it's between Only Sterling and Saquon for me for the Giants.
Yeah, there's a lot of tough ones this week, and we'll probably handle a lot more of them tomorrow, Sunday, when we get this live stream going, in probably the most important week of the year. So make sure you come kick it with us tomorrow on Sleeper. We typically start at noon Eastern Standard Time, and we go right up until kickoff. So if you guys are on the Sleeper platform or you follow us on Twitter, we'll tweet the links out there, and you can come hang with us. But if you got more, we'll tailor them to you, or you can hit us up on social this weekend at SMS_fantasy on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to get Landon or Mark, you can get their individual handles, and Scott for that matter, in the description below. But for the last segment here, we've got about 15 minutes. We're going to go through some daily fantasy sports, specifically on DraftKings. For those of you that missed the playoffs, your fantasy season's not over. There's a couple things you can do to stay engaged. I think one is DFS. A lot of good contests, a lot of opportunity to make a little bit of cash and stay involved. I think that's the number one thing, is staying active and staying involved with fantasy football this time of year, not quitting, because there's a lot of information that you can pick up that will make a difference in next year's draft season. So I would say, one, stay involved, and two, just pay attention, man. Like, just really, really take in what players are being used in the playoffs down the stretch, who's emerging late in the season that might trend towards next year. So Landon is our resident DFS, wizard. I'm going to kick this off with him. We've done a lineup each. We're going to do it for a bigger, like, GPP tournament style with a grand prize pool, lots of contestants. So I'm going to kick it off over to him, and he will walk us through a little bit of our DFS talk here.
Yeah, this is a really good week for DFS. Some good matchups. The pricing has gone up. It's a little bit tighter. Guys like Devontae Parker have steadily risen. Miami as a whole have been kind of a slate breaker for DFS, where those players with Devontae Parker and Gesicki have actually won millions of dollars, which is pretty amazing to actually say out loud. I want to throw it out to our listeners. If you're still listening at this point and you want to play DFS with us, against us, send us a DM on Instagram with your DraftKings handle. And if we get enough people actually sending us a request, I'll start a contest. We'll play for $1 or $5. Maybe throw in the DM how much you want to play for. No more than $5. We want to keep it good for everyone. And
keep it friendly.
Yeah, keep it friendly. And play head to head against your boys, the SMS crew. But so there's a lot of different constructions. There's a construction where you want to go tournament plays. So a play where you play maybe players with really bad matchups, because they're not going to be very popular, or players that are really cheap, super high end, high chances of busting, high chances of high rewards. Or there's safer players, cash plays, where you play a smaller group of players. Like if you're just playing the 4 of us or 5 of us or 12 of us in the contest this weekend, maybe you go a bit safer. But when we do it, we're going to do a winner take all. So there's not going to be a first place. So it's kind of going to be a tournament format where you want to beat everyone. So that's kind of the format we're going to talk about. And so Marky, you're not much of a DFS player. When you constructed your lineup, kind of talk the listeners through how you picked your guys.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I started at quarterback, but that's just because I have a lot of confidence in this guy, and I usually go for someone middling at the quarterback position, as rarely as I do play, just to kind of start. And I usually go from the list down, so it's not really that formulaic in any way, but I don't spend my wad on quarterbacks, and I don't spend my wad on the defense either, because there's so many variables in the defense, and you're always going to get, among the cheap ones, someone who performs really well. So I always like to save up and do like a flex that ends up costing a lot. I like to go for a big name at flex once I've got the majority picked out, and then I usually like to go over and work backwards from there. So For instance, one guy that I instantly jumped out for me. It's like I say, Jameis Winston at quarterback. I just know he is going to be throwing so many balls every game of his career. So for me, that's a great pick right there at 6,400. Are we going to work through our teams right now? Is that what we want to do?
We can talk about some guys that jump off the page, and then we'll go through our teams.
We'll go through our teams after. But yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, some maybe starts of the week almost for you that you kind of had to throw in your lineup.
Yeah, so I avoid bad matchups. Like if a defense scares me against certain receiver or certain running back, then I'm probably going to stay away from them. So the stack is another thing that you reminded me to keep an eye out for when I'm choosing my receivers, is to choose the quarterback, wide receiver, or tight end combination who all go for the same team. That was
right, double points. Yeah, if Winston has a good game, hopefully he's thrown into your stack. So Mackenzie, I mean, you haven't been super active this year either with DFS. We used to always play the Millionaire Maker, but that gets kind of expensive. So what you look at when you constructed your lineup?
Yeah, I would say for me, I have still been active. I mean, not to the tune that you are active, because you, sir, are a little bit of a fiend. However, I've used to play the Millionaire Maker contest habitually, and this year I started out probably the first 5 or 6 weeks playing it, had some decent success, kind of dropped down to the $3 like play action 100K to first type thing. So I've been involved, but you and I have had some success in the past. My prerogative usually start with quarterback, and then I actually flip down to defense and tight end. I take care of those positions that cost the least, so that I can kind of get them out of the way and get a better picture of how much money I'm looking to spend per player.
Yeah.
And then from there, I actually end up looking at the value players next. So I go quarterback, then I go tight end, defense, and then I go for like my third wide receiver.
You scroll
and my
down
second
there, yeah.
running back. Yeah, I spend down, because spending up is very easy, but when you go down and you try to fit in those players that are your tertiary pieces that kind of fill out your roster but you're not really excited about, if I do it the other way and I'm like, oh, I found, in this case, I found a very volatile option in John Ross coming back, who's probably going to be very low owned at $4,400, just because we haven't seen him for, I don't know, it feels like 8 or 9 weeks right now. He's coming back off of injury. He's not going to be highly owned, but he's also very cheap at $4,400, provides a potentially high ceiling. So like that's a guy that maybe I'm excited in playing. So that's kind of the way I fill out my rosters. And
well, it's almost like a little bit of novelty when you play a player like that, right? It makes you
very true.
Laugh. It makes us laugh if you're sharing it as one of your picks. But I think that's good, because obviously you're willing to take risks, which is just one of the number one things as a fantasy player, whether it's fantasy
That's
or
right.
DFS. Risk taking is numero uno.
And Landon and I have talked like a lot off air about daily fantasy sports and how you almost need to have that gross factor in order to be successful, because typically the teams that you walk away from crafting and you love them, they don't usually end up working out.
It's funny how that works.
It's so funny how that works. You're all hyped up. You're like, this lineup is sick. It's going to destroy. We're going to make some money. And then it's, your bottom of the barrel team. And it just leaves you scratching your head. And the teams where you're like, oh, I'm just going to, throw this player in there, and maybe I'll take a shot on this guy. And you end up actually coming out with decent results. You need a little bit of that gross factor. And I think this week I certainly have that with this lineup. So I'm going to play this lineup, and we'll see if it cashes or not.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, I played Ryan Tannehill against Jacksonville. I don't even remember constructing the lineup. I think I stacked him with A.J. Brown, and that's the only one that cashed for me. And it was the grossest lineup on paper. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking, but everything worked out. And that week he put up over like 40 DraftKings points. He was one of the top quarterbacks. So I'll talk really, before we go over our lineups, I'll talk quickly about chalk and how you might hear it as a DFS term where, say, Dalvin Cook is ruled out for tomorrow. Alexander Madison at $4,500 is going to be owned in probably 20-25%, maybe even higher in lineups.
Higher.
It could be. It'll be 80. Say 50. Like 50% is really really high for DFS, but
I would say 40.
yeah, and that would be insane, right? They play Detroit, but so you need to make the
Juicy
decision
matchup.
when you're playing to either full fade them and say, you know what, maybe Abdullah's going to be involved, maybe they don't use him as much, like how Brian Hill was a few weeks ago, all that kind of stuff. You could full fade those guys or just play them in 100% of your lineups or 80% of your lineups, depending how many you're constructing. But some people really like fading the chalk. Some people really, maybe you just need a part of it if you're going to make a lineup with Christian McCaffrey. You need Madison and McCaffrey to make it work, kind of thing. So
Right.
depending on your strategy, depending on what you want to do, if you think they're high owned, you can either play them with the rest of them if you don't want to miss out on the guy like Tyler Higbee last week, or just completely fade. So just some strategies if you're playing the Millie Make or the $3 play action.
Yeah, and sort of like parlay off of your sort of point here, Landon, I think that Pittsburgh defense is going to be very chalky this week. I think a lot of people are going to be in on them at $3,500 going against the Cardinals. And for that reason, I have picked a guy who I think is very nicely priced at $5,800. I'm going to go Kyler Murray, who I think that can still have a going against the chalk. And that basically tells me, hey, Kyler might be very low owned if Pittsburgh D is highly owned, if I perceive them to be chalk. So Kyler Murray at 5,800 is where I'm spending my money at quarterback, and I really, really think he's going to be successful regardless if Pittsburgh defense is solid or not. We've seen through the Jameis Winston experiment this year that a quarterback can be fantasy relevant while still turning the ball over 3 or 4 times a game. So while Kyler might turn it over, I do believe that he provides himself a nice floor with his mobility and the ability to have a good game.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it. So let's go over our lineups that we constructed. We may use these lineups if we get a lineup together with our listeners. So I will start. And I don't have him in any other lineups this week, so I'm going to go Lamar Jackson, $7,400. I'm going to stack him with his favorite receiver, Marquise Hollywood Brown, at $4,700. I'm going to run it back. So I'm going to... Oh, wait, did I do that? No, I didn't. Just kidding. So normally, because they play San Francisco this week, right? That's right.
Who? The Ravens?
Who do the
They
Ravens
play
play?
Buffalo this week, Landon.
Oh, they play Buffalo. Okay, I'm an idiot. Anyways, sometimes it's really good to run it back with like a receiver like John Brown or someone from the other team, or Cole Beasley. I did not decide to do that. I
would love to see the Ravens and the Niners play every single week from here on out, but we don't have that luxury.
I've got Aaron Jones at $6,700. I picked Alexander Madison regardless of Dalvin Cook at $4,500. I've got Odell Beckham Jr. at $6,300. And Jameson Crowder, $5,300. Jack Doyle, he's going to be chalky at $4,600. And I had enough to spend at Alvin Kamara, $7,000. And I went with Steelers D, a very chalky defense, at $3,500. And I think I used my full $50,000 of salary.
I don't think that Jamison Crowder will be owned basically at all. I think it'll be a handful of percentage just with how bad he's been. Kamara, on the other hand, should be highly owned at $7,000, and Alexander Madison at $4,500, especially if Dalvin Cook, like you said, is going to be out. So I think you have a good mix there, Landon, of guys that have good upside and low owned players. So I like that. It's good. Marky?
All right. So I'm going to go ahead with, like I said, Jameis Winston here. I have got him stacked with Mike Evans. I think that's going to be a really interesting game playing Indianapolis, but I do think the receivers are going to have a heyday as they usually do. I've got Darius Geis for $4,900. I've got Austin Eckler for $6,300. Christian Kirk, $5,200. Curtis Samuel, $4,900. Darren Waller for 58. Went up for my flex and got Aaron Jones for 67, and then finished off with the Titans defense at 26. So like I said, saved money on the defense, went for a hot shot quarterback who throws a lot of passes, and then stacked him up with Evans. And I believe I was the exact 50,000. Had I $100 more, I'd have gone Godwin, I think.
Now, a commonality that does not exist between us is I did not go Steelers D, and I did not spend my 50,000. I have $100 remaining.
Okay.
And I'm not looking to spend that extra $100. If you have a lineup that you like and you have cash left over, sometimes it's best just to leave it. You got the right mix. You got guys that you like. There's no sense in spending up if you really feel you don't have to. So, like I said, I got Kyler Murray at 5,800. I am playing him naked. No, he's going to be wearing clothes. I'm playing him without any relation to running back, tight end, or wide receiver. So I don't have any Christian Kirks or Larry Fitzgeralds or, God forbid, David Johnsons on this team. I'm playing him alone. So, yeah, Godwin. Ooh, that was nice. So Kyler Murray at 5,800. At running back, I am also playing Aaron Jones. I think at $6,700, that price point is beautiful. They play Washington. Green Bay should be able to run ragged on them. I also have Darius Geis at 4,900 coming off a beautiful win last week. A big performance from Geis. And I think that Green Bay can be run on because I've seen it happen all year. Geis and Peterson combined for 236 and 3 touchdowns last week, and I think the Darius Geis train will continue to roll. Love the price at 49. Could be very chalky. DJ Moore at 7,000. Really like his season. Another guy that I've been high on, Cortland Sutton, 6,400. And then John Ross is the sort of wild card play here. I'm not really sure what he's going to bring to the table. All I know is Andy Dalton's back at quarterback. John Ross is back in the lineup. Look back to weeks 1 and 2 of the NFL season, and you will see absolute fireworks from these two. I like it. I'm putting some money on him, 4,400. Jared Cook comes in at 4,200. That could be chalky as well. I think he's a safety valve for Drew Brees along with Michael Thomas. Stephon Diggs, I fit in at my flex, 7,600. Should have a good day against the Lions. And I spent down at defense. I went the Baltimore Ravens. $2,900. I think that they could force a lot of turnovers. We saw on Monday night, I played the Vikings defense. They gave up 37 points, but also scored 11 fantasy points with a pick six and a ball on the ground. So just goes to show you that the game script and the points allowed don't really mean everything for a fantasy defense. If you can still get the odd turnover or two and a score, you're all set. So I like the Ravens' ability to do that.
Yeah, so I was talking to actually our good friend Miles today about defenses and how it annoys him that it doesn't matter necessarily how many points they give up. It's all about sacks, interceptions, that kind of stuff. He thinks there should be like a time of possession, like bonus score or something for defenses, but that's just not how it works. Sorry, PD, but I guess the three of us, we should go over Scott's team here. He went an interesting option and went Kirk Cousins and Kyle Rudolph stack. I don't hate it. Paying up, Kirk is a little bit expensive, but he's been decent for fantasy. So I'll go over the rest of Scott's team here. We've got Benny Snell at $6,100. We have Kareem Hunt at $6,600. Marky, you want to go with his wideouts?
Yeah, so he has got the guy who can apparently catch anything, Devontae Parker, at 6,900. Obviously, his value has skyrocketed recently. He went for a flyer on Mecole Hardman, and I don't hate that, at 3,800. Obviously, he's got the touchdown upside. He's not going to get too many targets, but still, bit of a risk, high reward. Calvin Ridley, 6,700.
I like that play.
Yeah, that's a nice little matchup for him. As long as Matt Ryan stays protected, then Calvin Ridley should see a lot of action.
Yeah, and Jameson Crowder, I think that's a little bit of a homer pick. And Steelers
I don't love that
DST.
pick, to be honest. I don't love the Jameson Crowder pick, to be honest.
No, I don't know why I went with him, because I think everyone really likes Robbie Anderson. So I think I went kind of against the grain with Crowder, and we'll see if it pays off. He had a lot of targets, just didn't really connect with Darnold last week. So, anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the DFS segment. I always have a lot of fun talking DFS, daily fantasy sports. Obviously, I always put in. I usually have like 10 or 11 lineups, and I don't use any optimizer or anything. I do it all by hand. I go with my gut. I do a segment every week, almost every week, about my DFS plays. So if you're interested, you can send me a message on Twitter or be a patron for the Saturday morning snap. All right, guys. Well, have yourself a great fantasy playoff week 1. I really hope you guys win, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/SaturdayMorningSnap.